The other thing, I know we've talked about this before, but do you just want to talk about how different it is to center your characters in the working class or the rising middle class as opposed to writing about nobility, and why you
Yeah.
chose to do that, and what additional things you think it brings to the reader?
So I started writing some working class characters as my Northfield Hall novellas, which are a spin-off from the Prestons. So I have this established nobility that I write about, and then these are the people who live and work on their estate. And it is slightly different. And it's also funny to go between them because like you're like changing your worldview.
Yes.
But I think one thing is comfort that you can give the characters, especially writing this book, which is tackling labor rights
Right.
and the franchise.
Hmm.
And this is 1819. The Industrial Revolution has been going on long enough, maybe like 50 years, that
Hmm.
there are factories, there are children, there's already backlash to children in factories. There
Yes.
are all sorts of, there's such poverty in
Hmm.
Britain at this time. So when you're writing working class, you have to engage with that, even if your characters are miraculously not impoverished, which my characters at Northfield Hall, the whole concept of Northfield Hall is anyone who works there, they live off the land, they make their own linens, and they also get a share of the profits of the estate, which it's not that profitable, but they're getting more money than the average
Right.
person. So
Right.
they're living in a state of comfort, but they have to engage with these family members who aren't, and they have to engage with the realities that they might have been living in that impoverished state. And so I think with this novella in particular, I found myself engaging with that and trying to think, okay, how do I get this on the page without it being a really depressing story? Because
Hmm.
romance, I feel, overall needs to be a joyful story. It
Right.
has room
Yeah.
for not joy, but like the story overall needs to leave the reader feeling happy,
Hmm.
not like, wow, that was depressing. So that's I think the creative challenge that it
Hmm.
gives me, but also it then allows me to get rid of a lot of things like I don't have to there's not as much like status obsession. There's not as much
Right.
the commoners, the working class, they didn't have as much of an emphasis even on legal marriage. There were a lot of
Hmm.
like common law marriages. And so then you get to like explore these different dynamics of people exploring different communities and navigating all of that.
Yeah, that's one of the things that really stands out to me about your writing is that you explore that. And as we talked about a minute ago, just the dynamics of marriage beyond we're standing at the altar, what happens after, right? Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I think for this story in particular, with the suffragette uprising prompt, my first thought was like, okay, so suffragette, I think of that as being an unmarried woman, and so she's
Hmm.
gonna like meet a man and they're gonna tame each other in these different ways. And I was just like, I mean, that's a very interesting story, but I also just wasn't it wasn't speaking to me
Right.
in that way. And then when I was like, okay, but what if this is a couple who are happy together, but she shifts how she's orienting to the world, and then he
Hmm.
has to react to that,
Right.
which I think whenever I'm writing a story, I also have questions that I'm hoping it will help me explore, not really get clear answers on because these are like,
They're
how,
existential.
yeah, they're existential questions. But I think I needed to to be creatively inspired, I needed to be like, well, what question am I looking to explore here? And it was, what happens when you are privileged in a certain way, but you see that there are terrible things going on and you feel connected
Hmm.
to it? How connected do you need to feel before you participate? What
Yeah.
sacrifices do you make for that? And then also, as I started working with it, I was like, this marriage is actually a really good metaphor for how when you're in an entrenched society that has specific dynamics and it's changing. And so you have
Yes.
to figure out how to renegotiate. And that's Peterloo was all about the working class speaking up for themselves, trying to say, can we
Yes.
renegotiate this contract? Like their literal Magna Carta
Hmm.
contract,
Right.
and being oppressed because of it. And eventually there was progress. But yeah.
Yeah.
So metaphorically it worked as well.
It